All right, we're on to our second session of our first day. And so I'd like to welcome Aria Ma, the founder and principal consultant at LUNEAERA. So as you can tell by the title of her session, she actually helps nonprofits design very inclusive intergenerational pipelines. She is a Gen Z advocate for inclusive leadership. Love that. Also a frequent speaker at N10, Powers of Light, and the American Association of University Women. And Aria, I think I saw somewhere that you're also into weight training. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, very interdisciplinary here.
Amazing. I would love to learn more about that maybe another time, but that's
Yeah,
very cool.
for
Kudos to the
sure.
discipline there. All right, I'm gonna let you kick it off.
Great. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Aria, and today I'm going to be presenting on building an intergenerational people pipeline for sustainable and long-term growth. I use memes a lot, and this is my way of communicating and kind of like bringing in generations together. So, post a meme to boost morale, or host a meeting to talk about meeting to boost morale. We always love meetings to meet. All right, so let's get started. I really want to start off with if you could scan the QR code or if you go to menti.com. Menti, this is a way for us to do just a quick interactive session here. So if you go to that, and actually let me post the code in the chat here. Um, what questions do you have about building an intergenerational team? Because I really like to cater my topics and the talk itself to the questions of the group. So just go to the QR code or menti.com on your browser and put in that code. And we will take a look at some of the questions that everyone has so far about building an intergenerational people pipeline. Any questions you have specific to your organization, anything you're hoping to get answered today, just so that I can cater the presentation. And I'm going to share my screen here. So the first question is, are the younger generations going back to phone calls over email or text messaging? That's a really good question. We're actually going to go over later in the presentation different modes of communication that generations actually have, and how you can cater your entire communication strategy to them, but also what is the attention span like, for example, for younger generations. But the short answer is text messaging and email is way better. Most people do not answer phone calls because there are a lot of robocalls, and if you answer a phone call that from a number you don't know, that actually invites more robocalls. So phone calls is actually not a great way to reach younger generations. Aspects of including resect of elders. So can definitely talk a little bit about that. One thing I know is there are certain organizations that have an older donor base, and they actually enjoy, for example, letters being written more than they do, calls, text messages, emails. So we can definitely talk about that. How different are the giving capacities of different generations? Well, I have some statistics about that too and how to reach them, but there are very different ways to reach them and actually what different generations prefer in regards to, for example, a thank you note or no thank you. So, thank you for your questions. We're gonna get into it real quick here. Gonna go back to the presentation. So, just to start off with the agenda for this meeting, we're going to go over. I just want you to think about this. What is the one thing that you want to take away from this presentation? What do you want to achieve at the end of this month, and what do you want to achieve by the end of the year? This will give you kind of a good idea of what you're hoping to receive from this presentation and keep those things in mind as we go through the presentation. So the agenda, what the heck is an international or intergenerational team? What are the frameworks that we can put in place to achieve an intergenerational team? How do we scale this system? If you have a 5-person team and then you bring on more volunteers, how do we scale that from 5 to 50? We're going to do a collective audit on what we the knowledge that we have in our respective industries, and then I'll go over next steps on how you can implement these systems. So, hi, my name is Aria. I am an environmental conservation advocate. LUNEAERA is my consulting company specifically for environmental conservation nonprofits, but I've recently been branching out to other nonprofits. Powerlifting is a really big part of my life. It's actually one of the ways that I practice discipline, and definitely a way to connect with actually the different generations because it's a very intergenerational sport. I have more than 8 years of working in the nonprofit industry. My background is specifically in neuroscience research and conservation. I have a love for curating human connection, and myself, I am a Gen Z, so I bring a particularly unique perspective when coming into nonprofits and giving a perspective of what the team needs in order to bridge that communication. I've built LUNEAERA as my consulting company. Right now, I'm also building a couple of other community-oriented organizations in order to kind of bring together in-person communities on a local level and also improve health when it relates to environmental conservation. So what the heck is an intergenerational team? I want to talk about a story. I went to this meeting for like mid-level marketing like professionals, and it wasn't just mid-levels, so like mid-30s to 40s. It was like people from all different generations. There were more than 5 different generations in this room. And one of the most amazing thing that I felt from this meeting was the energy and also the interest to help, the interest to like give their own experiences. And it was because everyone in this room was excited to be there to provide their perspectives that it made for a really great conversation about the state of marketing, what we need to do to accelerate our leveling. Especially, there were some people there that were, in their early career and they were seeking advice from people who have been in the industry for 10 plus years, and then vice versa, 10 plus years. People were trying to look for what is the market shift right now and what our company is looking for from the people who are in the early career stage. So, what the recipe for this amazing event was excitement, the excitement of being there and sharing your knowledge. It was the idea of mentorship and the possibility that people would be able to help each other without having to go through weird hoops of or scheduling like one-on-one coffee chats when your schedule's already so busy. And the third thing was knowledge transfer. So this idea that you're not there really to take anything from anybody, but rather you are there to transfer your knowledge and to gain more knowledge. And that is the biggest thing about intergenerational teams, is building this sense of community where you're not exactly giving or you're not exactly taking. It's always a circular loop. And I think this is the biggest thing that Gen Z individuals need to understand. If you are hiring Gen Z, or if you're bringing on volunteers who are Gen Z, Gen Alpha, is they don't feel like they can contribute anything. But when you are able to make every single generation on your team feel like they can contribute something, that generates the excitement, that generates mentorship, and that generates this community that makes the team very robust. So this is the current landscape. 38% of Gen Zers report they will move on to another job next year. Job hopping is very similar. So the biggest issue right now for any organization, not just nonprofits, is how do you retain good talent? 49% of baby boomers are expecting to or already are working past the age of 70 or do not plan to retire. So we have like two big parts already of the spectrum. 75% of the global workforce will be made up by millennials by 2025. And most people across all these generations, when they're looking at a company, they're looking for values of community, access to knowledge, access to climbing the ladder, and authenticity of the teams. The challenges that organizations are seeking right now is the lack of general technology that brings people together. And instead of having one cohesive technology plan, you're possibly looking at so many different types of technology apps. Everyone has their own like planning app, a project management app. Every other month, there's a new app that someone wants to try. So nothing is cohesive. Values can be different across the generations that may not just be community access and authenticity, and the daily needs of individuals change because of generational knowledge. The long and short of all of this is to say that when you can't keep retention, when you have high turnover, that's wasted budget. That's wasted budget on training more people. That's wasted budget on bringing people in and then having the time for all your other team members to forsake other responsibilities to train this new person. There's a lot of consequences when you cannot retain employees, and the best way to retain employees is to make sure there is a type of community, a type of excitement that exists within your team, and that is how you are able to build a self-sustaining intergenerational team pipeline. So I want to do a temperature check with some of my peers in the industry who do work intergenerationally. This is one of my Gen Z friends. I spoke to the French Chamber of Commerce last year about how, for the first time, there are 5 generations in the workforce. For senior leadership, this is a huge issue, but it is not fully understood yet. When different generations collaborate, we see more innovative solutions to complex problems, better products that serve diverse user bases, and stronger company cultures that value various perspectives. It's not that we are lazy or only want to work or pursue a 9 to 5. We want to work with purpose without burning out. I want to ask questions, but often I feel like my boss is impatient and I don't know how to advocate for myself. I just need to put myself out there much more confidently. I don't feel like my experiences are valued now that younger people will work longer with less pay. I don't feel like there is a clear direction of advancement at a lot of these older organizations. So that's just a temperature check in terms of the younger generation and how they're feeling now that they're entering the workforce. So now we're going to go into frameworks. I'm talking about what is the problem, right? This is the problem is there is not enough retention for all across the board for generations, and there are specific problems, throughout these generations. But here are the frameworks that you can use to incorporate this type of community, this type of excitement that I was talking about into your organizations. So start with why. This idea is you know what you do and what the organization does and what your role does. Everyone else, your employees, they also know what they do. They have the job responsibilities. But this is not exciting. When you are trying to connect with your employees, when you're trying to connect with volunteers, everyone knows what you are doing. Everyone also knows how you're doing it. If you're an environmental conservation organization, you are perhaps raising money to support coral reef programs. If you are working if you're working to improve accessibility to suicide prevention services, you're doing XYZ. But this is also not exciting when you are trying to communicate this across not just your employees or your volunteers, but with donors. You need to start with why. You want to tell me your dreams. Sell me you as a person and not your organization. Humans are very much emotional individuals. When you start with why, when you tell me about yourself, why you're doing this, start with a story about why you are here with this organization and why I should donate, why I should work here, why I should volunteer here instead of another place. You instantly form that connection, that emotional connection with another human being. If you start with what the organization does, it falls apart because I know what the organization does, but that is not what excites me. What excites me is a connection with another human being. So, why does this work? We understand that humans are emotional, so when we are able to start with why, connect with another human, and I become invested not in just your organization, but your mission and helping you sell your dream to other people. So the first framework I'm going to explain is value mapping. Value mapping is the process of identifying and visualizing core values that are held by individuals or groups within the team. You have to understand what drives their decisions, what they prioritize, and how they define meaningful work. So the four core parts here of value mapping: motivations and misalignments. One way you can do this is team members map out their top 5 values, whether this is autonomy, collaboration, skill transfer. Use a shared canvas. It can be physical or online and map overlapping values. This helps build psychological safety. Psychological safety is the idea that when you are in a group setting, you feel safe to give information about, oh, I feel like this could be better. I want this incorporated. You feel comfortable to voice your thoughts. When individuals on a team volunteers, employees across generations do not feel comfortable because they don't feel like their ideas are valued, they will not feel comfortable speaking up or contributing to a conversation. I've been in many meetings where I have like four team members in the conversation and like one person is dominating the conversation when there's four other people that I'd really like to hear their perspectives from. So by doing this, oh my gosh, by doing this, you help figure out what are the motivations on your team and what is the miscommunication in terms of values. And then once you understand that, you have a roadmap of what to do further to kind of bridge the gap. The second is building a shared why, and you create a team mission based on these values. And this doesn't need to be like, oh, you don't need to like set up a whole meeting to do this. It can literally just be an asynchronous object in the Slack channel or on like a Google Doc that people can just come in and share what are their values. So, for example, baby boomers might value their legacy and leaving behind intergeneration or generational knowledge, while Gen Z may value impact, and together that becomes lasting change. So once we are able to map out a shared why, we can create a full team mission that where everyone feels like their why is included. Collaboration roles, you use the map to assign roles based on what people naturally value. So, for example, if someone values structure, they can lead documentation or onboarding, and those who value creativity can lead ideation or experimentation. This is super important. When you are designating, for example, volunteer roles or you're hiring for a position, you really need to dig deep into how people work, because one project management software might not be that person's cup of tea, and then they might be doing things differently and then not populating that project management software. When we're not on the same page about the tech that we use, especially when things are so robust now and there's new software coming out every single day, especially with AI, you need to be on the same page about how people work and understand how your team members work. Because if you don't understand how your team members work, that's when communication gets lost in the gaps and you lose a lot of information, and then there's miscommunication in what someone was supposed to do, and then there builds resentment if there's no psychological safety already existing within the organization. Value pairs. You can pair team members from different generations who share one value, but they express it differently. For example, collaboration, boomers may prefer meetings because they're used to being in person, they're used to things being synchronous, but Gen Z may prefer async Notion comments, for example. So this is, again, you can pair an older team member with a younger team member and have them cross pollinate these preferences and how you can work through these preferences. So, for example, instead of maybe having a weekly meeting every single week that's 30 minutes, you could cut that down to 15 minutes. But before the meeting, you populate the meeting notes, go over the meeting notes, and then talk through what you need to talk through in the synchronous meeting. You cut it by 15 minutes. You have meeting notes already populated, so you're not forgetting anything and you don't feel like you have to like go over anything. And that way, you are again bringing two different perspectives together and bridging the gap. The second thing, framework, is shifting societal expectations. So right now we have different expectations for each generation, especially each generation coming into the workforce or like into your team. They don't really know what their expectations are. This is stuff that you need to figure out. You need to figure out by observing. So you need to understand parts of your team that them as individuals aren't really giving like mind or like headspace to understanding. This is your job, as a director or as the ED, to figure out what the societal expectations are within your team. So having one-on-one meetings with different generations in your team, if you're onboarding them, this can be part of the observation. Or if you want to, if you have a team member who's been there for a longer amount of time already, then you can chat with them in a different way, but doing it informally so they don't feel like it's, a weird conversation. You can chat with mentors in your network outside of the organization. A big thing that I always harp on is talking to, if you are like a geographic based nonprofit, talk to other nonprofits in your geography who might be working with a similar donor base, who might have similar ages of volunteers, similar age of stakeholders, and understand what other people are doing and what they are doing. That is one of the most honestly, like, advantageous things I've seen between nonprofits who understand the cultural, like, dynamics in their organization and how they can manifest that to be better versus, like, organizations who don't have a handle on this cultural thing and don't talk to other people inside their geographic location, for example. Statistics are numbers, your people are people. I had statistics earlier in this presentation, but again, if you are a team of 5, 10, 50, you're knowing each person, again, how they work and what they're preferring and what they seek out of the out of the job is incredibly important. So once you understand this cultural shift, you can design things for collaboration. So some want lateral growth, stability, or mentorship roles. Instead of setting like set things for this role and this role and this role, you can set the expectation of a shared norm that instead of assuming one way is right, and you can humanize generational quirks. So again, going back to the in-person versus in-person meetings versus sharing comments or notes, you can bridge those things together. And then again, once you understand what the issues are, you can set new status quos that assumes everyone is collaborating on the shared object instead of assuming one way is right. Once you're able to do that, you design policy and culture where Gen Z or millennials might have mental health days, student loan support, flexible hours, and keeping in mind that this is what they're prioritizing when they are looking for jobs versus Gen X boomers, they might be looking for caregiver leave, a phased retirement, or some type of intergenerational mentorship stipends. I think this is one of the biggest things for our older team members is they feel like there is like an expectation of mentorship, and this might be so, but they might not feel like they're getting anything out of it. So again, this is kind of the reverse of Gen Z and millennials feeling like they don't have anything to offer when they come into a new organization with older team members. Gen X and boomers might feel like they are often giving too much without feeling appreciated. So intergenerational mentorship stipends, or even as a director or ED, mentoring your new team members saying, hey, this is kind of the norm in our company. Here are the ways that you can show appreciation for our Gen X or like boomers or just older team members. And in that vein, you're able to mentor the younger generation on how you can make the older generation feel more appreciated so it doesn't feel like a one-sided relationship. The third framework is collective activism. So, collective activism is the idea that sustainable change comes from collective empowerment and not individual action. So, it values shared ownership, co creation, and decentralized power, where everyone contributes to the change regardless of age, title, or background. So, circle of power. This is the idea that instead of having, let's say, like one director and then like five people report to this director individually instead of talking together inside team meetings. So what this might look like, for example, is a meeting with this director. You have the team members are reporting to the director, and instead of talking with each other and collaborating on their tasks with each other, it's just talking to the director. So circle of power basically brings the power to everyone on the team. The director is still supporting, they're still supervising, but instead they give agenda items to the team members so they are leading equally, not just the director. And the director is able to come in and provide, support, more details here or there. But at the end of the day, you just give more power to everybody. Storytelling. So I talked about starting with why earlier in this presentation, and this comes back to being able to tell your story. A big thing that I've seen when people bring in volunteers or they bring in new team members is that they don't know what their department actually does in relation to other departments. And when you're unable to understand, how does fundraising and marketing, work together, then they're not able to have a very good grasp on what the organization actually does. And then if you don't have a good grasp on what the organization does, you can't give a good why to what you're doing, especially if they're explaining it to friends or family who don't understand, that industry and the language of that industry. That falters and that actually damages the soft power of your organization, which is the reputation and how others perceive it. Especially if you have fundraising campaigns, you're bringing in peer-to-peer fundraisers and they're unable to explain and give a good story, that damages that campaign. Having rituals is also incredibly important. So this means celebrating wins. What is like a tradition that your organization has when you have celebrating wins or when you are spotlighting volunteers? These rituals give an expectation that the work that you're doing is not just free work, but it is actually leading to improvements and benefits to the society. So, how can we celebrate those benefits and not just the work that we're putting in? Improving and maintaining motivation as a runway is super important because burnout does occur. And when burnout occurs, everyone is going to go back to their shared why. And again, if they don't know their shared why, if they don't know your team members' shared why, that team cohesiveness weakens and that decreases retention. Giving more senses of responsibility, and this goes back to giving more responsibility to younger generations that are entering the workforce so they feel part of the team. One way that you can do this is when you are bringing on volunteers or when you're interviewing, like asking them, what is something that we're not doing well right now and how would you change it? And here you can feel out how much of the responsibility they're willing to take on and also what their problem solving collaboration skills are like. And that way you can also figure out, oh, there are some things that we're not doing right now, but hey, this team member who might be coming on has these specific skills that could elevate our impact by doing XYZ. Knowledge transfer is the next framework. The goals are to preserve institutional memory, avoid reinvention of the wheel, for example, when an ED is a new ED is scouted, and supporting growth. So, mirror mentorship. We've talked about this a little bit earlier. Basically, having a mentorship program, but like not that like formal, just a way to pair up a new person on the team with someone who's been on the team for a while and have them mentor each other in a specific skill in an app, and making it feel like the team is collaborating together instead of one generation or like one team member is like teaching everything. The second is continuity mechanisms, and this is really important for preserving institutional memory and avoiding any reinvention of documents and things like that. You need to figure out how do you keep knowledge transfer cohesive in your organization. Once team members leave, how do their documents stay within the company, and how do your team members know how to access those documents? There have been many times where I've seen, oh, well, this person had all these documents, but I don't know where they are, and it's hours and hours and hours of work just misplaced. And then they have to reinvent the wheel. So this could look like new digital assets, this could look like a new copy, and all of that. It's not just the amount of work it is and how many hours it will take to reproduce, but it's also the mental load on the volunteers, on your team members, because now they feel like their work is not preserved correctly, that no one will care about it, and that decreases their internal want, motivation to stay at that organization. And again, that also decreases retention. So once you reduce the friction of any of these mechanisms, it makes it easier. If you make their day to day easier, then they're able to focus completely on the work that they're doing rather than the process of having that work remembered or storing it. Having these processes in place is important for operational continuity. The last thing here is shared ownership. So having a project, this goes back to understanding how each team member works. If someone prefers, more supervision before they go in it by themselves, or if someone prefers doing work by themselves before they go in to collaborate, being an understanding of different people's preferences of working allows you to delegate different parts of a project to them, so it gets done faster and it gets done better. Because if you're delegating work to someone whose workflow just doesn't fit within the way that project is framed, it will be done slowly and it'll be really frustrating. And unfortunately, I've seen this happen where some projects are just thrown to the wayside. The next thing I want to talk about is non-compensational reward systems, and this is applicable for both volunteers and for team members. So the goal is for retention and communication. Again, recognition. This is something I've seen with volunteering spotlights. There's some things I've seen in Slack channels where you do a kudos. Something I've seen in a lot of startups, for example, is doing a kudos at the beginning of big team meetings. And this is just an opportunity for people to jump in and verbally give appreciation and gratitude. Having events, whether or not you are a virtual, you are like a remote organization, hybrid, or completely in person, having these types of events is super important to build team relationships. I know not everyone likes these remote activities online because they can be quite boring, especially after you've worked 9 to 5. But there are a lot of apps out there that help you like organize these events, and I'll go into a little bit of those later. And growth opportunities. So we talked about earlier how a lot of Gen Z folks are hopping from job to job, and they see that as a way of getting more compensation and more, just more lateral experience. One thing that I've seen a lot of nonprofits lack is growth orientation or just an expectation of how you can grow. And once you put this expectation into place or make the psychological safety net applicable in your organization where people feel comfortable to ask, that is a big part in retaining because, again, when someone leaves your organization, you have to retrain that person to take their place. That's 6 months of getting to know the ropes, the mission, being able to storytell, being able to understand everyone's shared whys, understanding their shared why, and then 6 months later they're gone. And then you have to do the cycle over and over again. So by implementing this growth orientation in the beginning, people understand, okay, there is room to grow, and this is how I can expect things to happen. And keeping that transparent goes a long way for psychological safety in an organization. So, how do you scale? A quick note on intentional tech use. You don't need to follow the hype. There are AI, there's programs, there's apps coming out every single week, and not all of it is applicable. I want to go over, some communications. This is applicable for both team members and for volunteers. For communication, Slack's the popular one. WhatsApp and GroupMe I've seen used to communicate with volunteers who don't want too much of a formal way of communication, especially if they're just onboarded for an event. Document management, there's Google, there's Notion, there's Box. Notion has been one that's coming up a lot recently because it's kind of Box and Google meshed together. Event management, Side of Genius, I really like. The UI is super old, but if you are an organization that is looking for volunteers who are a lot younger, that are maybe like middle school, high school, they're like looking for volunteer hours. Sign Up Genius is just super easy for them because that's what they're used to. And although it's an old UI, it's just whenever you are approaching an audience, you need to understand what are they used to, what are they used to using, what do they know how to use. And Sign Up Genius is just one of those ones that's old but very applicable today. Time tracker is also a good one if you're looking to track volunteers' times. And remote culture, I really like Hey Taco and Donut. They have implemented apps basically into Slack, where they'll do like automated water cooler chats, maybe like every Monday, that asks a question. People can answer it just to get to know team members better. And if you have any other recommendations for apps, things that you use, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So we're at 11:33. I want to do a quick collective audit. So when you go back to the Mentimeter, you'll come across some questions and then we will share them together. And then I will also ask or answer some questions as well. So let me just bring it back. And I really like Mentimeter because again, it's a really interactive way of presenting and talking to folks. So it's free to use. You can implement it in your teams if you want to do like a temperature check on how everyone's feeling. I really like it for presentations because it's also anonymous, and I'm very used to like doing a lot of these presentations in person. And sometimes soft-spoken people don't really feel comfortable in asking questions. So this is just a really great way to anonymize everything so people feel like they can contribute and are able to and are able to provide their perspectives. So I'm really curious as to what current challenges people are facing with your current team. So it doesn't have to be your people team, but um, just your team in general. And those will come up here. And while I'm talking, I think, let's see, I'm going to go through the questions here. I'm 45 and I never answer my cell unless I recognize the number. Yeah, because these robocallers are just really awful. So if you are taking the time to call, I would not suggest putting the time in because it is super time exhaustive. Um, Here is, yeah, the QR code again. Let's see. As one who's older than most on this call, this is really helpful to me. Fast but fascinating. Yeah, I'm really sorry. I will share the presentation at the end. This is a lot of information and it's usually like for 1 hour. So definitely this is, oh, I'm sorry. I was sending it to just the host and panelists instead of everyone. I apologize. See, even I have like technological issues too. So it's not just a generational thing. I always say these generations as an American thing, since the whole thing kind of started with baby boomers, that's rooted in the experience of World War One. When did we begin applying, exporting this to the entire globe, or is it an aspect of globalization? The generation born in 95, 2020 may look more similar country to country than the generation born in 45 to 60. Sorry, this is a side note, but I find it interesting. I think it's globalization, but I also think with startup culture, operations, and new organizations popping up, especially like at least the culture in the US where a lot of high school students create like organized social impact organizations to get into college, it has become a super generational topic. So let's see here if people are starting to put stuff in. Okay, I have a lot of tabs open. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. Lack of accountability, little initiative, absenteeism, disengaged due to fundraising targets, staff turnover, aging staff facing major retirement, no recognition of different styles, only chief advancements. I just returned from a 1 year mat leave and we now have a new ED. She's fallen into the trap of reinventing the wheel and we have gone through 3 sets of staff. Any insight? Yeah, this is really rough. Okay, so for lack of accountability and little initiative, the frameworks that I provided can help, but it always comes down to really understanding the motivation of why a volunteer or staff member is on your team, and giving them one-on-one attention. It does take a lot of energy from you in the beginning, but it helps a lot in the long run because once they feel like they're being seen and they feel like their perspectives are heard, they will want to be accountable and like do the initiatives. But another thing is like giving them projects that they actually enjoy and asking them like what is it that you want to work on? And if you need to move them laterally somewhere, that's always way better than having to hire someone new and having them relearn the whole company mission, company organization, that kind of thing. Disengaged due to fundraising targets. I think, without like any more details in general, I can speak to the fact that sometimes not having like, instead of having one target, that can be very like not, what is it called? Not motivating because you're not hitting those targets. So having the ability to like space them out. Let's say it's like $10,000, so you say like 2,000, 5,000, etc., and then you're able to celebrate the wins at each target. It also is very good when you are fundraising to have like milestones because when you have the milestones, people who donate actually see that and want to help contribute to milestones. No recognition of different styles, chief advancement officers erratic style, which does not work well for the team, rest of the team. So this is like when you need to go to the board of directors, or like the ED, because if it's like one of the directors that are not doing things properly for the team, that becomes just irresponsible use of funds, and that's definitely a conversation with the board of directors. And you can do that either through like a email, like your own personal email, or do it like anonymously with like your group of teams. Staff turnover and aging staff face major retirements in the next 3 years. Yeah, so that what I was talking about with these different frameworks also will help with that. Absenteeism, not coming to meetings is a huge thing. I've also have seen, and that comes really down to remote culture if you're doing like remote meetings. And then also this all comes back to shared why, psychological safety, and this is where you might need to start building things up slowly again. The reinventing the wheel, new EDs always want to come in and like redo things their way. One solution I've seen worked in the past is actually talking to other staff members who've been at the organization for much longer now, and having like a, what do they call it? Like being able to bring in like a group of people to chat with one person, but doing it in a manner so they don't feel like they're being bombarded with all this new information. So if you haven't talked to them directly yet and they're like not listening to you, then bringing in, talking to other groups, other members of the team to see how they feel, and then having those conversations. Skills have not kept up with the real world. We went from 200K to 1.3. These are really big on professional development. Never worked at a company organization where this is the norm. Um, so professional development. I love development because it is technically like a non-compensational reward system. And one thing that I've seen help work in the past is bringing up those numbers directly to the ED and saying, "Hey, if people are leaving because they don't feel like they don't feel like they're developing like professionally, they're gonna leave and you're gonna lose this much money, and then you're gonna have to rehire people who don't know how to do the job." Sometimes you just have to be frank and upfront. And if you're not comfortable with doing that, again, like talking to other people in the organization that you are comfortable with and seeing if they feel the same way and coming up with a plan to talk to the ED. And then if the ED is not listening, again, going back to the board of directors. Um, Real quick, same Mentimeter here, and also same code. You should have seen it go or to the next page for the presentation. But what tools and frameworks were most helpful to learn about today? And let me copy and paste. People team challenges, much harder to engage people online versus in person, Joanne says. So, one thing I have seen help with people online versus in person is there's a disconnect, right, between your online team versus your in-person hybrid team. And when you have a shared space on Slack or some communication channels, you're able to bridge that communication clearly. I've been on some teams that are hybrid and it has been rough because I don't know a lot of the people that I'm working with personally, and that kind of makes it hard to be able to say, hey, I can't do this or I'm uncomfortable with this. So for example, there was an organization that I was on helping, and they had a water cooler chat that was basically like this donut tool that would every week automatically say, ask like fun questions like, what is like something fun and scandalous you did in the past week? And being able to have that as like the home base for people to share their personal stories has been incredibly helpful. Okay, so happy to answer any other questions in the chat in these last 2 minutes. I'm also going to share the last slide of this page, and then while you're scanning QR codes or typing questions, this is the QR code to the presentation. Just put in your email, and then it'll automatically send it to you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I do a lot of posts and just like engagement in terms of things I see across not only the nonprofit sector, but the startup sector, and how a lot of things that we can learn from the startup world be applied to the nonprofit world. That's like one of my major insights, is because I really dislike this idea that in the nonprofit world, we have to work meagerly, we have to sacrifice our life, our time, because we're doing social impact. There are a lot of startups that are also completing social impact things, and there's a lot we can learn from the startup world in terms of like engaging culture, engaging people, especially younger generation, different operational things, and how we can keep that motivation going. I also write a newsletter about all the things that I talked about and just insights across all of the work that I'm doing in community building and environmental activism and in engaging leaders for tomorrow. So if you're interested to read more of that, here's my newsletter. But yeah, in the last minute, we were building our board with intergenerational become one of our oldest number 78 youngest, and they are paired up. Power pair. That is awesome. Um, People staff issues should not be taken to the board of directors. I can't speak directly to like yes, unless they are with the ED. Yes, I agree. If it's like interpersonal like team members, it should not be directed to the board of directors. If it's like with the ED, it should be. Sorry, I should have been more clear. But yeah, thank you everyone for your attention. I really appreciate it. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and all these things.
Yes, thank you so much, Aria. This has been fantastic. I just love being able to focus on the people who are really like the hands and feet of the organization, really doing the work. And I think that's not thought about as much as it should be. And it seems like pretty intentional. So I hope that, you know, if you weren't able to scan the QR and get the slide deck right now, causevox is going to send that out to everybody here today and all the registrants. So you'll be able to just be able to process everything Aria said, like through the slide deck and in the recording. This has been fantastic. Please show Aria some love in the chat. And thank you so much for your time today and your
Yeah, of
expertise.
course. Thank you so much, everyone. And if you have any questions as well, feel free to just send me a connect on LinkedIn and message me. I'm happy to answer anything.